Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We do talk about Blu-rays here, but as I've said in the past, we also talk about physical media in general and the idea that there are just certain movies that have not made it past VHS, and we're still waiting for DVDs on these. Some of them you can stream, some of them you can't, but what I have here is another stack of, as far as I know, VHS only releases. And I'm going to go through these. I'm counting Laserdisc as, VHS, if that makes sense. What I mean is, I've seen some people come in and be into the comments and be like, oh, well, this was on Laserdisc. Okay, yes, I agree. But Laserdisc is harder for people to play than VHS, and I think a lot of people don't even have VHS players now, so I consider them concurrent. They were probably released at the same time. What I mean to say is, when I say VHS only, it's more for the algorithm than anything, but they are technically not released past VHS. That said, I'm going to start with a movie that I actually haven't seen, and I know I'm going to like, but I got to check it out yet, and that is Club Life. And this one is an Elric Kane recommendation, and it stars the great Michael Parks. Enter the dark world of punks, new wavers, and rock and rollers at the City, a tawdry but flashy Hollywood nightclub, alive with pulsating music and gyrating dancers. The city seethes with life and death. Meet Cal McFarland, a young and handsome motocross champ who left his small hometown and girlfriend behind for a chance at stardom in the bright lights of Hollywood. He gets a job at the club and is quickly taken in by owner Tony Curtis, but he sees the place full of decay of Hollywood by combining drugs, prostitution, and violence. Cal fights back against the seedy decay of Hollywood by combining martial arts, trickery, and plain street fighting. And basically, Dee Wallace is in this too. Oh, I forgot about that. But Michael Parks plays kind of the Dalton, if you're doing a Roadhouse, and this is pre-Roadhouse kind of comparison, but it sounds like a blast. And it's a Trauma Team release, which is not necessarily my favorite thing, but this sounds like one of the best of that ilk, and a fun action, thing. It says, where Saturday Night Fever ends and Flashdance stops, Club Life takes off to fight and dance the night away. It's a Prism release, pretty rare, but definitely one I'm going to check out probably very soon. One we've talked about on the show, cover's a little faded on this one, and this is the thing you'll see with VHS is, and I think I've talked about it before, like with one of the releases last time I did one of these videos, go back and check that out too. You'd get VHS tapes that were just stuck on a wall facing the sun, so they would get faded in the sun, and this has been a little faded. This is Dead Solid Perfect from 1988, I want to say. Yeah. And I think this was made for HBO. It's a golf movie with Randy Quaid, Katherine Harold, and Jack Warden. It is from Bobby Roth, the director of Heartbreakers, which we saw get a nice release from Fun City Editions. And I'm a big sports movie fan, even more sports movie than sports. And this is just a really solid, no pun intended, movie about a sort of down on his luck professional golfer, Kenny Lee, played by Randy Quaid, who finds his way into the good graces of a sort of bigoted but very well-off gentleman played by Jack Warden, who agrees to sponsor him so that he can kind of continue in his professional touring golf thing. And so he kind of gets back up on his feet, but he's struggling with his marriage with Katherine Harold, who I just adore, one of my favorite actors. And so, we're just seeing a lot of behind the scenes golf stuff, and it's a really interesting drama, the way it plays out. It would be a good double with like Tin Cup, which is a little bit more comedic, but which also touches on some of that behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, as far as I know, no physical release beyond VHS. Some of these you can find streaming on YouTube, but I never rely on that because those could go away literally anytime, so that's another big one. This one's been a nice discovery, and I'll come back to this director. This is Fred Walton, who did not just the Stranger When a Stranger Calls, but he also did April Fool's Day and this movie Dead Air with Gregory Hines, which is of a subgenre that I love, which is radio DJ thrillers. So you have like talk radio, and there's definitely some others that of course I can't think of right now, but yeah, it's really interesting. He's a big fish in a small pond. Basically used to be a big DJ in the LA market and has now moved to like way out, I think, Northern California, and is working as a DJ for a small radio station. And, is pretty arrogant about himself, has his own show where he does basically not only plays music, but he also writes and performs this like old-timey spoofy detective show where he's a detective and he's sort of telling this story of, mysteries and stuff. And he starts getting this call from this woman who's sort of threatening and sort of creepy, and then people start dying and the cops are kind of suspecting him, but he's like, I was at the state, he has an alibi, and it doesn't seem like it's, anything to do with him except some psycho. And so it just becomes a matter of like, what's his past exactly? What's happening with him? And it's just a solid thriller that I think was made for cable maybe, but another one that did get a Laserdisc release, but not a VHS. I mean, not a DVD. And Hines is good in it. The supporting cast includes some folks you'd recognize, but I'm blanking on who to mention. But yeah, solid thriller from the director of April Fool's Day and When a Stranger Calls. Okay, this is just one of those like WTF, like wow kind of movies, and that's Demon Warp. I think this is also from 88. Dead Air is from 94. Yeah, this movie's nuts. This movie is crazy. It stars George Kennedy. It has one of the great openings of all time where he and his daughter are playing Trivial Pursuit and they get interrupted by something. It's a Bigfoot movie, but there's more going on than Bigfoot. Demonwood Forest, dark, mysterious, as old as the earth itself. Its primordial silence is broken by the howling wind and blood-curdling screams. Welcome to the land of Demon Warp, a horrifying chasm between light and shadow, ancient fear and future shock, and living and the undead. George Kennedy stars as Will Crafton, a vengeance-bent hunter searching for the ominous creature. I'm not going to say what happened, but yeah, so it's him, and then there's a bunch of teenagers that come out to the cabin, and it's one of those things, but it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. It has Billy Jacoby in it, who you'd recognize from, like, just one of the guys and stuff like that. Yeah, it is just nuts. And I don't know if there's a YouTube rip of this currently. There have been, but it's, as far as Bigfoot movies go, it's one of the weirdest and one of the most entertaining, and it's a shame this isn't on disc, so I'm hoping at some point these all get sorted out. We get Blu-rays of all these, but for now, no. Okay, this one's really cool. The Freeway Maniac. This is actually one of my favorite discoveries for this year. I think I mentioned in the last video about Fatal Pulse, which is a cool slasher that Phil Blankenship turned me on to. This is another Phil pick, and it is just that great combination of wacky, slightly funny, well, actually more than slightly funny in parts, but like, violent canon film slasher. And it basically sets up like a Halloween style murderer psychopath who gets in one of my favorite scenes, gets set loose from the institution he's being held in, and gets free and starts messing with people on the freeway. But it also becomes a movie about this one particular actor that he almost kills in the freeway stuff, but she gets away, and she's off working on a low budget sci-fi movie, and so he tracks her down to the set of that movie, and then it becomes like a slasher on the set kind of movie, but it is bonkers. And the guy who plays the killer, I guess, also played the Shape in the last 3 David Gordon Green Halloween movies. So he's like a big, threatening guy and doesn't say a lot, which is one of my favorite things for psycho killers, is not to have a quippy line or two. He does speak a little bit, but pretty nuts and pretty fun, and movie I never heard of until Phil turned me on to it. Hopefully we'll get a Blu-ray at some point. This is a media VHS tape, but there is a kind of crappy rip on YouTube of this, I believe. But I just, like I said before, I'm just sick of pixelated rips and wanted to have a copy of this for my own. So Freeway Maniac, definitely a big recommend from me. Next up, this one's also kind of nutty. It's called Kidnapped. It is from 1987, I believe. And it stars David Naughton and Barbara Crampton. And Barbara Crampton, I think pretty sure it's set in LA. Okay. It's from the director of Howard Avitas directed Mortuary, which I'm a big fan of. That has a Blu-ray. That's a kind of bonkers movie. This is a bonkers kidnapping movie, revenge movie, about this woman and her little sister, played by Barbara Crampton, and I forget who plays the little sister, but they are the daughter is kidnapped ostensibly by some folks into sex trafficking, and so Barbara Crampton needs to go after them revenge style with the help of cop played by David Naughton. But there's some really creepy stuff early on where the guy that's going to kidnap the sister is like hanging around them and aggressively hitting on them, and Barbara Crampton has to be like, dude, no, and just get the hell away from me. And it's just really unsettling in a way, and she's great in it. And yeah, it just kind of gets nuts. It's just one of those movies it's not like Freeway Maniac crazy, but in terms of where it goes and the climax, it's just one of those that I was like, wow, okay, didn't see this kind of coming. It also has Charles Napier as like David Naughton's police boss, and there's a couple other recognizable faces in here too that I'm blanking on, but very interesting and kind of crazy, like I said. And I obviously I love Barbara Crampton, and it's just one of those movies that I feel like doesn't get talked about. I like David Naughton a lot too, and so he's just helping her through the movie, and it's fun. It's a fun time. I think there's also a YouTube rip of this, but definitely one I hadn't heard of until I started going down this VHS only rabbit hole. Okay, a little change of pace. This is more of a drama, but has some comedic elements a little bit. It's called Made in USA, and it stars Chris Penn, Laurie Singer, and Adrian Pasdar. And it's kind of like a road movie thing. I've talked about this on Pure Cinema. Another one that I think has a YouTube rip, but does not have anything beyond that in terms of physical. Dar and Tuck got the shaft. That's Pasdar and Penn. Got the shaft once too often in Pennsylvania coal mines, so they set their sights on sunny California, stole a couple cars, and blazed the trail for the coast. Then along came Annie, Laurie Singer, a sexy, wild young thing who drove the boys off the deep end and turned their Made in USA joyride into the craziest interstate crime wave since Bonnie and Clyde. So it does become, they kind of run into her at one point because one of the guys is kind of hitting on her mom, and then she ends up going with them, and it becomes more Bonnie and Clyde-ish, but it's got a good soundtrack. It opens with, not that this will sell you, but it opens with a Timbuk 3 song called Life is Hard, which is a really good opener song if you haven't heard it. But I like Adrian Pasdar. Obviously, people know him from Near Dark if you're a genre person, and Chris Penn you know from a lot of other stuff. Same thing with Laurie Singer. You'll definitely know her from her 80s work, but she a little underrated, I think, at this point. Unless you knew her work in the 80s, you don't maybe remember her as well, but she's great in this. And yeah, it's just a really interesting road drama sort of thing. And this director, Ken Friedman, I don't think did a ton of other stuff. I need to look him up again, but yeah, really interesting, good soundtrack. Next up, this one does have, I think, a streaming version on Amazon Prime, which is where I watched it originally. It's PI Private Investigations. I think this is also from 88. Yeah, that seems to be a heavy year for this stuff. This one was suggested by, I think, Dino Perserpio from the I Eat Movies podcast told me about this one, and it's right in my wheelhouse, partially because it has Clayton Rohner, who I'm a huge fan of. I love Modern Girls. I love April Fool's Day. I love I Madman, things like that. Like, he's just one of my faves. And so this is about, it says a young architect finds a badly beaten corpse in his shower. The dead man, it turns out, was helping his architect father's investigate a very corrupt gang of drug dealers. And now the cops are convinced he's holding the evidence against them. So it becomes kind of a Hitchcockian thing where he's getting chased by cops and potentially mobsters, gangsters types. This also has Ray Sharkey. Talia Balsam is really good, daughter of Martin Balsam, who I believe is also in this, as is Anthony Zerbe, Paula Matt, and I want to say there's a couple other folks in here that you'd recognize. The guy from Commando that I'm blanking on. But yeah, this is just one of those that I feel like nobody talks about. Directed by Nigel Dick, who I believe was a music video guy. But, you know, has comedy, but is more of a thriller and an interesting role for Clayton Rohner, who's a good everyman, I think. And this one's a discovery within the last couple years. This is a Key Video VHS. But yeah, totally dig this. Watched it a few times and it's actually growing on me. It's got another one with a good soundtrack, and it uses the beginning instrumental phrase of Bon Jovi's Wanted Dead or Alive. I think right around when it was coming out, it uses it as like an instrumental score, and it never gets to the lyric. And I think it maybe does it at least once, maybe twice, where you get that sort of opening bit from that, and it plays really well in the movie for whatever reason. I really dig that. Anyway, that's PI Private Investigations. And more 80s and a total change of pace. This one also this is from 85-ish, I think. This is Pulse Beat. And another one that's a little faded with time, but it's a Lightning Video release. It's pretty rare, pretty hard to find this one. And it's like for fans of Heavenly Bodies, but they want something more sexy. This stars Daniel Green and anybody else that you'd reckon. I don't know. I think it's an Italian production, but it's like Heavenly Bodies. It's kind of like, I love that they're going after Perfect, the movie with Jamie Lee Curtis and John Travolta. Move over, Perfect. Pulse Beat dances onto the screen with the handsome Daniel Green and the gorgeous Lee Taylor Allen. Roger, that's Green, is the owner of a very successful and exclusive health club. His gym attracts good-looking women and men who want to pump iron, aerobicize, and mostly socialize. Roger and his beautiful aerobics instructor Annie work out together in and out of the club. Annie pushes Roger to compete in the National Aerobathon. Now, this is hilarious. But for Roger to come even close to winning, he must overcome his fear of defeat in front of Annie in the world. So this has, like, unlike the dance-off at the end of Heavenly Bodies, this has an aerobathon where people are doing different exercises, but sort of to that exhausted stage, I think. But it's like a triathlon, but more events, if you will. And it's super fun and silly. And I've sort of dreamed of screening this for a crowd in LA, like a small micro cinema VHS screening. I think this would be an absolute blast. It's just so funny. I know that comedies don't bring people out, but this one is well worth your time and unforgettable. And I don't know if this has a YouTube rip right now. It did maybe at one point, but Pulse Beat, super fun stuff. This one's great. This is a drama, but kind of a thriller. This is Shoot from 1975, I want to say. 76. Kind of in the Southern Comfort / Deliverance, but more like a revenge. It's like, I don't know. Cliff Robertson, Ernest Borgnine, Henry Silva. There's some other folks in here, but this one's a rare VHS. Definitely one that's hard to find and does have a nice YouTube rep, I think. Cliff Robertson and Ernest Borgnine star in a thriller more deadly than Deliverance. Rex Jeanette, that's Robertson, and Lou Rinaldi, that's Borgnine. And 3 other buddies plan on spending a relaxing weekend hunting. What they get instead turns out to be a horrifying yet exhilarating experience as all the men fall prey to a group of unknown sadistic hunters looking for human game. But the battle is just beginning. With one man wounded and another dead, Jeanette's friends want revenge, and they will stop at nothing to get it. So it starts as sort of a encounter with, most dangerous game hunters, but then it becomes like a group revenge thing, and it's dark and fascinating and well worth a look. We've talked about it on the show, and I can't remember what episode I brought it up on, but again, super rare Embassy VHS and no DVD that I'm aware of. So that is Shoot. This next one also, I think, ended up, I can't remember if this is another Dino pick, but I think it is. This is Signal 7. Maybe it was another cab driver movie I'm thinking of with Dino. Signal 7 is cabbie lingo that a driver is not responding and may be in trouble. Speed and Marty are 2 middle-aged cab drivers and best friends, both down on their luck. The duo sometimes moonlight as actors, but for the most part they play cards and boost their conquest of female passengers in the back seat. This film is a long night's journey into daylight and self-discovery, covering the adventures and interactions of these 2 San Francisco cab drivers. So it's, who are the guys? Is it Bill Ackridge and, no, I don't remember the actors' names, but they are really solid in this, and Coppola presents it, so I think he's a producer. I want to say it was shot on video and then transferred to film. I can't remember. It's got an interesting look about it, but it's very docu-drama feeling. It feels like you're hanging out in the back rooms with these cab drivers when they're between shifts, and you get a sense of their lives. Some of them have lived kind of rough lives. It is a little bit like the conversations that are happening on the sidewalk in Taxi Driver. Not quite as outlandish, but definitely like it recalls, Peter Boyle's character's story about getting laid in the back seat. Like some of that stuff comes up, but really interesting to see their behind the scenes of their lives and the acting. There's some bits where they're auditioning for acting parts, and they're very vulnerable, and it's just a cool, low-key, interesting drama that ramps up a little bit towards the end. But definitely a nice discovery for me. I think I talked about it in our Missing Pieces 80s episode, but another VHS that's not easy to find. One place I recommend going that I've been getting a lot of stuff from, in fact, I've got a big group of tapes coming from, is there's a couple VHS collector groups on Facebook. Actually, there's a bunch. One's like the Horror Collectors United or something, and I've noticed that one's pretty great for these fire sales where people will sell a bunch of stuff, and it's like a claim sale. So they'll put a picture up with a price, and you just say if you want it or not, and then they'll roll them all together with a combined shipping price, and it's fun. I've gotten a lot of stuff that way, and I'll probably have some more videos based on this next round of stuff. But okay, this is one people definitely know, but really needs another physical release. This is Summer Camp Nightmare. I want to say this is from 86. Did get a Laserdisc release, and I think the rip on YouTube might be from that laser, actually. But super interesting thriller horror kind of movie where a bunch of kids go to a summer camp run by a very uptight Chuck Connors, and they sort of have a Lord of the Flies revolution almost, and the folks that take over, the kids are first, I think, like, oh, this is cool, we're running the show. Then they suddenly realize that these guys are actually maybe a little darker than they want to go, than they expect, and so things get intense, and it's real solid. And again, people know this movie, but it's still, I'm dying for a Blu-ray release of this, and I hope it happens at some point. I don't know the deal. You just never know if it's, you're not saying it's the case with this one, but if it's like music rights, or if it's a company that went bankrupt, or if it got bought by another company and nobody knows where the rights are. I mean, these things can all play into why a film doesn't get a release beyond VHS. But I hope with some of these, I hope the rights get worked out. Summer Camp Nightmare is definitely worth your time. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. And here's another from Fred Walton. This is a big one for both Elric and I. Elric discovered this one. It's called Trapped. It is from 1990. And I can't remember if this is another made-for-cable thing, but it's rated R, so... but it stars Kathleen Quinlan, and it's sort of a building slasher. Kathleen Quinlan stars in this chilling story of a building management executive trapped in a high-rise with a psychopathic killer. Working late one night, Marianne Marshall, that's Quinlan, discovers all the exits locked and the high-tech security system disabled in her 65-story office building. And Bruce Abbott co-stars in this. But yeah, I'm not going to go too much further than that. This one, another one that's had VHS rips on YouTube, but I don't know that it currently does. So it's one that's harder to track down. The VHS wasn't cheap, but it wasn't the most expensive that I've in this group for sure. But it's definitely a good, solid thriller. Like the killer in this gets kind of freaky, and I do like the sort of claustrophobia of a building location. So it's really worth checking out, and another one we'd love to screen in town at some point because it is so hard to see. But well worth your time. Good horror movie. And then lastly, another one that's an Elric discovery that I absolutely adore, and this is a TV movie called Vampire. And it stars Richard Lynch, E.G. Marshall, and Jason Miller from The Exorcist. Set in San Francisco. It also stars Catherine Harold. And directed by E.W. Swackhammer, which I believe is a favorite of Amanda Reyes's. I want to say he's one of her favorite TV movie directors, but I may be misremembering that. So pardon me, Amanda, if I am. San Francisco is being plagued by a series of gruesome murders, and local police are baffled by their haunting resemblance to a 30-year-old chain of unsolved homicides, while investigators are desperately searching for a psychotic killer. Former police officer Harry Kilcoyne, that's E.G. Marshall, forms his own, more horrifying theory, and it's basically about Richard Lynch being a vampire, and he's really good in this, and it's actually one of my favorite TV movies from the 70s, and this one, I didn't even realize it has a really crappy YouTube rip, so I had to get this. This is not an SP tape, like I think it's an EP or LP tape, unfortunately, but it's the best out there, and it's the only physical source for this movie, and I just have this weird feeling that this one's not going to get a release of any kind. Written by Stephen Bochco, co-written by Stephen Bochco. But yeah, real solid, dark TV movie, and one that was totally off my radar till Elric discovered it for one of our TV movie episodes of the show, and I'm so glad he did, because it really has become a TV movie favorite, along with one that got a Blu-ray release, and that's Victim with Bewitched. I can't think of the actor's name because I'm just old. But yeah, just some fun stuff in the TV movie world that's not getting discussed. And VHS is one place where some of those ended up physically and may not get passed. Although it has been nice to see some TV movies get Blu-rays. But from what I gather from Kino, just sort of the little bits here and there that they've said about sales of that stuff, I just don't know if it's selling well enough that they see it as a viable thing to keep coming back to, and that's a bummer, but like I know that it's hard for people to take risks on things they haven't seen. But I gotta recommend, picking up TV movies when they get Blu-ray releases, because we need more of them, and there's just so much stuff out there that hasn't come out. There's a lot of it on YouTube now in okay form, but some of these I just feel like are going to disappear completely at some point, and that makes me sad. But anyway, Vampire is it for this round of VHS gems. Hopefully there's some stuff in here you haven't heard of or that you're interested about. Let me know if I should keep on doing these. I can probably scrape together at least one more gems video, and then, beyond that, I wouldn't necessarily call them gems, but I would definitely say there's a good, 15, 20 more movies that I think are interesting that, I don't want to say are like must watches or anything, but like I'm glad I own them on VHS, if you will. So there's a lot more to talk about on this topic, but hopefully you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.